Tonight, as millions of fans wait for word on tickets to Michael Jackson's memorial, his manager reveals the pop star was preparing for a worldwide comeback tour.
He said, "Frank, this is our time again."
I'm Russ Mitchell. Also tonight, in Alaska, supporters and enemies of Sarah Palin speculate on why she resigned and what her next step will be. A South Carolina town remains on edge as police hunt a serial killer.
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
And good evening. As Los Angeles prepares for massive crowds for Tuesday's Michael Jackson Memorial, fans from around the world who entered an online drawing, more than 1.5 million of them, will get word tonight if they were one of the less than 9,000 people chosen to receive tickets to the event. Each person selected will get 2 tickets. Also tonight, 2 days after Alaska Governor Sarah Palin announced her resignation, the debate rages on about her decision. CBS News correspondent Terry McCarthy is in Palin's hometown of Wasilla, Alaska this evening with the latest. Terry, good evening to you.
Good evening, Russ. And when Sarah Palin announced she was giving up the Alaska's governor's job 18 months early, she left behind more questions than answers.
That I have made. All I can ask is that you trust me with this decision and know that it is no more politics as usual.
In fact, it was political theater, which left both her supporters and her critics mystified at what she plans to do next.
I think she's getting ready to launch either a Senate or a presidential campaign.
I was disappointed. I felt like I wish she had completed the job she committed to.
Even GOP insiders were confused.
It's also unclear what her strategy is. Again, she said she wanted to lead effective change outside of government. Well, now people are going to be saying, what is it that you mean by that?
Palin's Facebook page talked of politics as a higher calling, and she complains that she's been harassed by frivolous ethics complaints. Complaints issued by people like Andre McLeod, a local political activist who's been responsible for 4 of them.
Are you harassing her?
Of course I'm not harassing her. She's been under a microscope for a while now, and so she doesn't take well to scrutiny, I guess.
Ever since she was appointed John McCain's vice presidential running mate, Palin has come under intensive media scrutiny.
Like what one specifically? I'm curious that you...
all of them, any of them that have been in front of me over all these years.
And was lampooned by comedians like Tina Fey.
I don't know, is it?
The attacks didn't let up after the election. Last month, David Letterman angered Palin with a joke about her daughter getting pregnant, which she later apologized for.
I would like to apologize, especially to the 2 daughters involved.
But now, Palin seems to have had enough.
It would be apathetic to just kind of hunker down and go with the flow. We're fishermen. We know that only dead fish go with the flow.
At high school here in Wasilla, Palin was known as Sarah Barracuda for aggressively going against the flow on the basketball court. Now she's given up the highest job in Alaska. The question is where, if anywhere, she goes in the world of politics. Russ?
Terry McCarthy in Wasilla, Alaska. Thank you and welcome to CBS News. This is yet another tense night for a small South Carolina town where police remain on the hunt for a serial killer. As Mark Strassman tells us, residents of the town of Gaffney have been here before.
That would still hurt. Oh, it would hurt. Yeah.
Janice Foster spent the holiday weekend locked and loaded. Weapons lay within easy reach throughout her house.
It's definitely very, very scary.
It's in the back of your mind. You know, no matter where you go, people's talking about it.
Talking about being terrified. In 1 week, 5 murders here. Last Saturday, Klein Cash, a peach farmer, shot in his home. Last Wednesday, 83-year-old Hazel Linger and her daughter, Gina Parker, gunned down together at home and remembered together at today's joint funeral service. On Thursday, Stephen Tyler and his 15-year-old daughter Abby were shot as they closed the family appliance store, less than a half mile from the sheriff's office. Investigators say all the victims were bound and shot. This sketch, their best glimpse of someone most people here expect to kill again.
We have many leads coming in, still coming in. We do want those to continue. Anyone that feels they have any information, how slight it might be, please make those calls, get in touch with the task force.
Hard to believe for a town of only 13,000 people, but 40 years ago, another serial killer, nicknamed the Gaffney Strangler, abducted and killed 4 people. Once again, the community's psyche is shattered. Unless you're expected, people in Gaffney say don't drop by.
Every time somebody opens a door, they're carrying a gun.
This county had 6 murders all last year. In the past week, it has had 5. Even many open stores here keep their front door locked. They'll open it for a known customer and then quickly lock it again. Russ?
Mark Strassman in Gaffney, South Carolina. Thank you very much. And still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News. Tributes to Michael Jackson are springing up around the world. But when we come back, a tense region races for the return of ousted Honduran president. A week after the military removed him from office and sent him into exile, the deposed president of Honduras tried to defy his foes and come back home today. Kimberly Dozier has the latest on this fast-moving and potentially explosive crisis in Central America.
The ousted Honduran president's high-stakes gamble may have paid off. As he jetted defiantly back toward his country, the government that replaced him signaled it might be willing to negotiate. Manuel Zelaya left Washington, D.C. for Honduras Sunday afternoon with several journalists and diplomats in tow, including the president of the UN General Assembly. Moments after Zelaya's small jet took off, the new Honduran government warned him not to attempt to land in the capital, Tegucigalpa. Helicopters over the airport backed up the threat, while thousands of Zelaya's supporters gathered outside. There were even conflicting reports that Nicaraguan troops were moving towards Honduras to support Zelaya. Late today, Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega denied that. With tensions rising and Zelaya's plane halfway to Honduras, both sides seem to blink. U.S. officials say Zelaya has decided if he's refused permission to land, he'll divert to El Salvador. And the de facto Honduran government contacted the Organization of American States to open what U.S. officials called a process of dialogue over international demands Zelaya be allowed to return. The crisis began last Sunday when Honduran forces broke into the president's home, dragging him out of bed and flying him out of the country. Zelaya had been planning to hold a referendum that day on changes to the Constitution that could have allowed him to run for another term. The Army, the Congress, and the Supreme Court had declared the referendum illegal. Within hours of Zelaya's ouster, he was replaced by one of his own critics. But the international community condemned what many called a coup.
We're now getting reports that as Zelaya's plane approached the airport, Honduran police opened fire with tear gas on the thousands of protesters outside, and there have been some serious injuries. U.S. officials say if Zelaya is not allowed to land, he will be back in Washington, D.C. by tomorrow to continue talks here. The new Honduran government says it won't allow him to come back into power, but it's already reversed itself just by saying it's willing to negotiate. Russ?
As we said, this is a fast-moving story. Kimberly Dozier in Washington, thank you very much. Vice President Joe Biden said today the administration's offer to negotiate with Iran over its nuclear program is still on the table. But Biden also appeared to suggest the U.S. might not stand in the way if Israel decided to attack Iran.
Look, Israel can determine for itself as a sovereign nation what's in their interest and what they decide to do relative to Iran or anyone else.
And just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, President Obama heads for the Kremlin, hoping to reset U.S. relations with Russia. President Obama leaves tonight on a week-long trip that starts in Moscow, continues on to Italy, and winds up in West Africa. At his first stop, Mr. Obama will try to reset relations between the U.S. and Russia. White House correspondent Chip Reed is in Moscow.
When President Obama last met with Russian President Dmitry Medvedev in April, both men spoke of the dismal state of U.S.-Russian relations.
I think that over the last several years, the relationship between our two countries has been allowed to drift.
To help get back on track, the two presidents agreed to begin negotiations on a new nuclear arms treaty to replace the 1991 START treaty that expires in December.
I think there's a possibility that the United States and Russia might be able to reduce to perhaps 1,500 nuclear warheads on each side.
That's down from the current threshold of 2,200 warheads and would be a small step along the path to what Mr. Obama hopes will one day be a nuclear-free world. But U.S. officials say it's unlikely there will be a major breakthrough at this summit, nothing more than an announcement that, quote, some progress has been made. One major stumbling block, missile defense sites that the U.S. wants to build in Eastern Europe to protect against possible missile launches from Iran. Russia strongly objects to the U.S. plan, calling it a direct threat to their security.
if you don't see some degree of comity or progress on missile defense between the two countries, it's not likely you're going to see a lot of progress on other issues of import.
Those other issues include getting Russia to take a harder line against Iran and North Korea. Another difficulty at this summit is that while President Obama will be negotiating primarily with President Medvedev, the real power in Russia is still held by Prime Minister Vladimir Putin, who the president will join for breakfast on Tuesday. Their relations could be tense following Mr. Obama's assertion last week that Mr. Putin has one foot in the outdated old ways of doing business.
Asked if that comment could be taken as an insult that would make negotiations even more difficult, a White House official said no, that it will simply pressure Mr. Putin to show he's, quote, a modern guy. Chip Reed, CBS News, Moscow.
Coming up next, from pop royalty to ordinary folks, tributes to Michael Jackson pour in from around the world. Finally this evening, 10 days after the death of Michael Jackson, 3 of his hits are still among the top 10 downloads on iTunes, and there has been no let-up in the worldwide tributes to the King of Pop. Sandra Hughes has the latest.
From the London arena where Michael Jackson was set to perform, a Jackson impersonator helped the Queen of Pop give the King of Pop a royal tribute.
Let's give it up to one of the greatest artists the world has ever known, Michael Jackson. Long live the King!
Back in the States, Beyoncé honored him in her signature style. Jackson's worldwide appeal is undeniable, and many of his international fans have traveled all the way to his Neverland Ranch in California, even though he hadn't lived here in years.
Yeah, he was a global icon. I mean, great singer, great dancer, I mean, great all-round performer. He was a whole package.
Jackson was a citizen of the world, and the world keeps coming to pay tribute. Frida Khan is from Iran and stopped in Los Angeles only to see Jackson's star on Hollywood Boulevard.
I just came and I made it to just come to see him. That's all I'm going to do.
The Caprielis family from Bolivia diverted from a trip to San Diego.
We try to come here to Hollywood and see the star and to understand what happened, you know.
To Brazilian reporter Adriana Arujo, this is the biggest story on the planet.
Usually I cover politics, economic news, not celebrities.
The death of this international megastar jet-propelled him back to the top of the charts all over the world. So coming to Jackson's parents' home in Encino was a no-brainer for these Canadians who wrangled a picture with him in Montreal.
And I also learned English because of him. I translated 50 songs of him to know what he was saying.
Back at Neverland, a media tour this week revealed it's become a ghost of what it was when Jackson lived here, when the place was filled with amusement park rides and kids. The current owner of Neverland tells CBS News recently he'd been fixing up the property, and Jackson was slowly warming to the idea of moving back. But now he says he has no plans to turn Neverland into a Graceland-like tourist attraction to keep the people coming. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Los Olivos, California.
And that's the CBS Evening News this Sunday. I'm Russ Mitchell in New York. Katie Couric will be anchoring from Los Angeles tomorrow, and I'll see you first thing in the morning on The Early Show. Good night.